So today's session is going to be about meeting them where they are, using OASIS interactive guides to support academic skill development within the classroom. We have three fabulous presenters in the Zoom room today. We have Amber Cook, who is an associate dean in OASIS, otherwise known as the Office of Academic. Oh my goodness. You're going to help me with the rest of it. Office
Support
of
and instructional
Support
services.
and Instructional Services. Welcome. Well, thank you for helping me with that. See, they're already helping at the beginning of this session. I love it. And we have Nykol Eystad, who is a lead librarian in OASIS, and Brittany Rogers, who also is a lead and oversees master's academic support in OASIS. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to the three of you. Welcome, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lita. I wanted to talk a little bit more about sort of who we are and the project that we'll be talking about before we go on to the meat of the presentation. So like Lita said, I'm Amber Cook. I'm Associate Dean within OASIS, and hopefully a lot of you attended the session yesterday that Pat Cahoe and Christy Frenza did, talking about our OASIS approach and some of the work that's been happening there. This session is going to really zero in on one of the specific projects that we had within one of the degree level verticals as part of that initial OASIS Students at the Center work. I am calling in from Asheville, North Carolina, where my internet sometimes works and sometimes doesn't these days after the hurricane. So if I disappear, Nykol and Brittany are here to jump in for me. I began at the Writing Center, as many of you know, and since we moved into OASIS, I've held leadership of the master's team and now the undergraduate team as well. And with the project that we're working on today, I was primarily in the background. So much of the work was done by Nykol Eystad and then Jess Philbrook, who was the predecessor of Brittany Rogers, who's here today. Jess has now gone on to a career in nursing, which we were sad and excited about for her. But they were the main folks working on this project, and then Brittany was one of our head developers in the project itself. So we all have different stakes in this and different backgrounds in this. And excited to have all of us here. Nykol, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Nykol Eystad. I'm the lead librarian for our master's team at OASIS. Been with Walden for 14 years now, I think. Started in the library as a subject librarian and then moved into management, and now happily over here with OASIS. And like Amber said, worked very closely with this project. So excited to present all of our good information to you.
And I'm Brittany Rogers. I've been with Walden for 5 years, started in the Writing Center, moved into the Writing Specialist role on the master's team within OASIS, and now I am the lead. I'm leading up the Writing Specialist within the master's team on OASIS. And yeah, this is a fantastic project. And like Nykol, I'm very excited to share what we've done and sort of think about the potential that these guides have for the university at large.
Thanks, Brittany. Thanks, Nykol. And I also want to point out we have a guest today, Kay Elizabeth McDonald, whose name you'll probably hear us say a lot during this presentation. She was our primary collaborative partner in the School of Counseling, which was the genesis for a lot of this work. So heavy props to her for the work that she did in making this possible. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide and we'll talk about some of the kind of origins of this project that we've been kind of referring to here. So pre-OASIS, before OASIS was kind of the reorganized home for the Library, Writing Center, and Academic Skills Center, we did have an initial partnership with the School of Counseling around their PhD Counseling Education and Supervision program. And a lot of the hope was to try to create a little bit of a skills curriculum for students who didn't necessarily seem to have some of the academic skills needed to complete coursework, whether that was research, writing, other skills. And the focus at that point was writing because we were still sort of divided into these topic areas. But we kind of came up with a general idea of creating this 6-guide curriculum that would pair alongside the course curriculum in that PhD program. And that was how the kind of early origins of that that interactive guide concept began. And that was, again, pre-OASIS and part of a counseling collaboration that started before I even came on the scene. So Sarah Prince, Jess Philbrook were heavily involved in that early stage. The next slide, Brittany. So was it fall 2022? I can never remember exactly where all of this fell. But when OASIS kind of came together and we started really thinking about academic skills in tandem with each other, rather than sort of separating writing from research, from time management, from all of those other things, because we know for students they can tend to be all of a piece. We started working together in degree level verticals, and there was a need within the master's program of the School of Counseling. There's 3 master's programs within the School of Counseling, and we wanted to try to do something similar. But we had a bigger vision for what that might look like, because we wanted to look throughout the entire curriculum, and not just at writing skills, but also at library skills, at academic habits, other sorts of skills, which OASIS was really broadening their focus to. So again, Nykol and Jess, Brittany's predecessor, spent a long time studying the curriculum of the 3 master's programs in the School of Counseling, and identified the academic skill needs that students had to succeed in the courses. So these are co-curricular skills. They're not necessarily taught as part of the course content. They're sort of assumed to be a skill that the students will either have or develop within their program. And we wanted to make sure that we created a way for those students to access those skills at the point of need, making sure that when they're in the course, being asked to write an introduction or search Google Scholar or whatever it might be, that they have a quick, easy way to learn how to do that as they're being asked to do that. So that was the first kind of project, was to really look through that curriculum and identify what those skills needs were. At the same time, OASIS was developing an academic skills framework, doing something very similar, where we were looking at all of the discrete academic skills that where our expertise was, and where the Walden's programs were requiring different skills, and thinking about how to make sure we're teaching those in the most effective way possible. So these kind of the tracks that Pat and Christy described yesterday, that's happening kind of in the background of this project that we were doing here with the School of Counseling. So once we developed that list, the staff within the master's team, and then later also our doctoral vertical within OASIS, had an interest in developing these as well. We started developing these guides in chunks. So we sort of identified the courses that we wanted to hit first, and then the skills that we needed for those courses. And then we developed those guides to go alongside that. So every term we developed another 6 or 7 guides for the new term start, and then we'd hit it again for the next term. So there's a lot of work on the course maintenance side. If we've got anybody here involved in that process, you're lovely people. Thank you for taking all our course maintenance requests, because we wanted to embed these directly in the curriculum. That's a lot of the process of Students at the Center, is making sure that this material isn't just sort of sitting out there somewhere for students to find, but really embedded within the program, really embedded right alongside the course content. And in the case of the School of Counseling, also an assignment itself, and we'll sort of show how that worked. So throughout the 2023-2024 school year, we were implementing these every single term within the curriculum of the 3 counseling programs. Next slide, Brittany. Thank you. So we had a couple ways that we were looking at this, how we wanted to approach it, that was a little bit different than how we've typically approached the co-curricular support that we have in OASIS. When we first started talking about this, the hope was to have it very tailored, very specific, but the School of Counseling very generously agreed with us that the idea of keeping it multidisciplinary would help us be able to use this in other programs. So since we developed this for in this partnership with Kay Elizabeth and the School of Counseling, we've also been able to embed many of these within Master of Public Health. There's some courses within MSN that have these guides. They're really applicable across the programs, and even in some doctoral programs and undergraduate programs as well. So we really wanted to keep them helpful and focused, but not by avoiding things like using counseling for every single example, or using only counseling resources to demo research processes. We wanted to make sure we were keeping these really multidisciplinary and able to be used across programs. We also wanted to use an instructional approach. So not just a job aid, not just something that teaches, something really quick and move along. We wanted a little bit of an actual instructional approach here. The idea being that faculty could then focus on course content, and they weren't also trying to teach how to find this resource or how to cite this source. They were able to focus on their piece, and then we had an actual, curricular intervention that taught the pieces that the students would also need to do this sort of academic skill work. So it essentially became an academic skills curriculum as we developed these 36 guides. We also wanted to make sure these were shareable outside the classroom. So we really wanted to focus on living them inside the classroom environment, making sure students could find them right where they are as our title says, not having to go outside and look for them. But we also wanted students who weren't in these exact classrooms to be able to access them on their own, for faculty to be able to share them. So if they're working with a student who needs help with a certain skill, they could easily pull from our website and then share that with a student. And then students could discover them themselves. If they recognized in themselves a need to develop a certain skill area, they can go through and go through one of these interactive guides and develop that skill on their own to be able to move more quickly through their program. So that was the basic kind of value system behind these guides. Next slide. No need to memorize all this, but this just to give you an idea of the topics that we wound up tackling. And you'll see at the bottom left, and I think maybe Lita is going to put a link in our chat to show you where to find these guides. But these are the guides that we wound up developing. And you'll notice that we did title these with a verb in most cases. The idea that we wanted to teach students how to do a thing, you learn how to read critically, produce clear writing. It's not just a topic that they're kind of vaguely learning about, it's an actual skill that they're going to be applying, a skill that they're going to be using and demonstrating in their classroom. And you'll see too, there's a wide range of topics here. A lot of them are related to writing and library. A lot of them are also related to, reading your assignment carefully and then developing your content based on, critical reading of an assignment, or looking at things like professional writing, professional documentation. As we know, a lot of master's programs in particular, not all of their writing is academic. Quite a bit of it is professional. Notes, clinical notes, PowerPoints, executive summaries. So we really kind of tried to map the resources to what students were actually doing in the classroom and will be doing in their professional writing later in life. So feel free to peruse those on your own time. There's a link right there, and we can talk more about if you want to try to do something similar in your program. We're happy to partner with you on getting some of these guides slotted into the right spot within your curriculum. Next slide, Brittany. So the guides themselves, I've been talking about them kind of in the abstract, but essentially what I mean when I say an interactive guide, these are guides that we created within Articulate Rise, which is a self-paced learning platform. We've got them in mind for about 15 to 30 minutes, sort of depending on students' pace, depending on their kind of reading skills. But the idea is it's brief, but not tiny. So 15 to 30 minutes to complete one of these guides. And within the guides, they'll have some written instruction, some video instruction, some activities and knowledge checks. So there's a lot of, again, kind of checking, did you understand what we just talked about? Trying out things, there's flip cards, there's just things to kind of keep them moving within the guide. And then again, it's discrete academic skills that are scaffolded throughout the curriculum. So we've thought carefully about where each particular guide and each particular skill lives within the curriculum. And this is something that's happening OASIS-wide as well with that academic skills framework, as we're thinking about when we want to introduce a skill to a student, when we want to reinforce it, those sorts of things are part of our conversation across OASIS now, and it was really part of this project as well. And then once those guides were created, each guide is placed within the School of Counseling. Each guide is placed as an assignment in a specific week of the course where that skill is required. So we want them to be, looking through this assignment, gaining the skill, and then when they're writing that paper or doing that research or whatever the next step is, they'll have that skill in their belt right when they need it. The way we turn that into an assignment is that the students will review the guide, and at the very end of the guide, there's a 5-question quiz, and they get multiple attempts to take it. Once they reach 100% on that quiz, they can download a certificate of competency, and then they can submit that for points. So pretty much everyone who does it and actually completes the quiz will receive full credit on that assignment. And it's a small credit. I think, Elizabeth, correct me, I think it's a 10-point assignment each time, but it's enough that kind of motivates them to do it. We've seen hugely high response rates where students are actually getting through the entire, thanks, Elizabeth, getting through the entire guide that we sometimes don't if it's a more optional resource, if it's not really embedded inside the curriculum. So that's been a good finding here. And not to spoil some of the later slides where we'll talk about feedback, but something that I thought was interesting, because it's a required resource, one of our fears was the students who are already pretty developed in some of these skills might be offended at having to go through a introductory skill session on something that they might feel like they're already familiar with. But we didn't really see that. We had a handful of students who did, but of the many students who probably never would have sought a resource in these areas, a lot of them said, "I'm really glad I took this. I thought I knew, I thought I had this under my belt, but I learned something I didn't know." So that was good. We didn't have a lot of that kind of backlash from students who felt like they shouldn't be required to take something like this. All right, next slide, Brittany. Just to give you a little bit of a visual of how this looks in some classrooms. So if you see her on the left, in the case of this particular course, we've got one of the guides in week 7. And then you look here, you'll see kind of how it appears in the Canvas classroom, what it is, how to prepare, and then how to click into it. And then that certificate of competency at the end, when a student has completed it, has passed the quiz, they'll receive the certificate and they can have it for their own use, or they can use it to submit for an assignment. So just something to have in mind too. It can be helpful too, not just in this kind of required course piece, but also if you're working with a student and they're really needed to kind of build their skills to kind of dig them out of whatever academic hole they may be in, having that way for them to show, yes, I did complete this, and yes, I did complete this quiz, can be helpful for that accountability piece as well. All right, before we jump into talking specifically about the guides, I wanted to give Kay Elizabeth a chance to chime in. Is there anything, when you think about this collaboration, or anything that came up during it that I missed, that I didn't cover completely? And I see you giving some more context about the assignment as well.
Thanks, Amber. I think that it might be worth noting that we did put them in as resources initially and found that students weren't doing them. So we wanted to just provide a nominal pointage just so that they could see that there's something due and that they would take that time. I think the other thing that I would say, maybe just echo what you shared already, Amber, is that our students really liked these, and I was completely blown away by it. I'll just be completely honest. Like, we had so many students who were like, "Oh, thank you so much for teaching me about the meal plan, in writing a paragraph." And I was like, "What? Who's excited about that? Like, I don't understand." So all of that to say, I just wanted to say that I was anticipating faculty pushback and not faculty. I was expecting student pushback on it, and it was overwhelmingly not pushback. It was welcomed with open arms. I want to say it was like something like 97% like said that they really liked it. like on that 5-point scale. It was crazy. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that I recognized students didn't know they wanted it, and then they got it. They were like, "Yeah, this is fantastic. I wish I had it sooner."
Yeah, I think the "I wish I had it sooner" is something that we hear pretty regularly in the feedback. And yeah, absolutely. That's something that we've learned too. We've created these slides, and we've taken this kind of nominal point approach in School of Counseling. Other programs, because of concerns around seat time and other kind of complicating factors, have just placed them in as learning resources. And there are students using them, but definitely not at the level of the students who are awarded a handful of points for using them. So that is a definite lesson learned, which is maybe not shocking, but it's been reaffirmed since we've worked with other programs as well. All right, I'm going to hand things over to Brittany. Brittany, who is dealing with pneumonia, I feel the need to say. So if her voice comes and goes, she is a trooper for being here today, and I appreciate you taking the time to show a little bit about the design of these as someone who built quite a few of our guides. So thank you, Brittany.
Hey, no problem. Yes, if I go off audio for a moment, it's because I need to cough. So just some considerations for designing these guides. We really, as Amber said, wanted them to be concise. We wanted them to be bite-sized. We wanted students to have substance, but not too much substance. We wanted it to be a supplement to their course material. We also wanted everything that we produced to be degree agnostic, meaning that if we were working with the School of Counseling, but if in the future another program wanted to embed these into their coursework, that would be a possibility. Also, that they could potentially be used in doctoral courses or undergraduate courses, adapted in that way. We also wanted to ensure that they were objective based, that the objectives were clearly stated, that the quizzes assessed those, that matched those objectives and assessed student learning effectively. We also understand that our students today like interactivity, really ensuring that there was a balance of not only text, but some visual elements, videos, some interactives, and that also that the guides were accessible. We spent a lot of time working to ensure that students with screen readers would still be able to access the content. And so I wanted to just give a quick demo of one of the guides. So I am going to navigate out and onto the web. Amber, could you just verify for me that you can see my web browser here?
I sure can.
Awesome. So instead of jumping right into the guide that I wanted to demo, I wanted to show you where these live on the master's page of the OASIS website. So our content is publicly accessible and available. Students, faculty, anybody can access this directly from the master's section of the larger OASIS website. And you'll see that at the top, they're organized by topic. So the one that I'm going to show you today is a writing skills topic. And I chose this particular guide because I think it so clearly illustrates what is unique about OASIS and this sort of combination of writing, library, and academic skills experts to bring kind of like a one-stop shop for students as far as academic skills development. This guide is research and write coursework literature. So a writing specialist, writing expert, and a library expert collaborated on this guide because students often we find that academic skills are overlapping and students want that information in one convenient place. And so often these guides provide a combination of types of instruction, writing and library. In this case, some of our guides will have aspects of writing or academic skills. So we're collaborating with folks across different specializations to really ensure that our students are getting the information they need in one place. So this is what a student would see when they would log in. They start at the welcome page, and it gives just a little bit of background information about what they're in for, 15 to 30 minutes to complete, lets them know at the end that they'll be prompted for a quiz and how to download that, and that it will serve as proof of completion. And then here are those objectives I was telling you about. So generally we have about 4 max objectives per guide, and they just telling students what the goal is, what will they learn in this particular guide. And then students can then navigate through the sections sort of in a linear way. They could also jump ahead if they wanted to. You'll see that the completion is tracked in this little circle, indicating with that sort of blue highlighting how far a student has moved through. So this particular section of the guide in this lesson focuses on the first objective. So the objective is clearly stated. And then we have content. Some of it is written, and as you'll see, there's frequent clicking to ensure that students are always interacting with the content. This is about literature reviews. This is researching and writing coursework literature reviews. So this graphic here is great. It gets students clicking, thinking about the differences between an annotated bibliography and a literature review. If we continue down, you'll see we always try to make things very visually appealing, make this as fun as possible. If literature reviews can be fun, making it as interactive and enjoyable as possible for students to work through. At the end of most of our lessons, we'll have kind of like a little assessment activity, something to just cement those takeaway points. And then there's always a knowledge check, an individual knowledge check at the end, where students just assess their knowledge of that particular lesson. I'm going to not answer that because I have a 50% chance of being incorrect there because I did not review any of this content in preparation for today. And then moving into another section here, you'll see this is where the collaboration component really happens, where a writing expert worked on that first, what is a literature review? lesson, and then a library expert, a research expert worked on the library component. So this lesson talks about how to conduct research for a literature review, starting with strong research, how to search the databases, how to review and adjust the searching approach. Again, always thinking about how we could keep these interactive, you know, allowing students to sort of click through, have images. Lots of pictures. And so all of our lessons are kind of designed in this format. Again, a sort of an assessment at the end, a quiz at the end of each lesson. And I am just going to poke ahead a little bit to the quiz section. The quiz section, as Amber noted, is we established the standard of 5 questions. Students have to pass the quiz with 100% to be able to get their certificate of completion. They have unlimited attempts to take the quiz. Once they get that 100%, they'll get their certificate, which can then be downloaded and uploaded into the classroom if they are completing for points. Again, just a variety of questions, true or false. Sometimes they're multiple choice. And then the certificate of competency becomes available at the end. One of the things that we were very particular about are the looks of the guide, ensuring that consistently that there's an aesthetic that reaches across all of our guides. They all look the same. They are all designed roughly the same, all objective based. And also just want to say that they were very carefully reviewed, went through multiple rounds of user testing and revision, both from OASIS experts, graduate students, and then faculty as well. And Kay Elizabeth was super instrumental in giving us feedback on these guides. And so that we were really able to return what we feel like is a quality product for students. This isn't something that was quickly slapped together. We really labored over these to ensure that the product was really, really good, and that we were sort of building credibility with the students, giving them what they should have in their courses. Right. So for the sake of time, we're so limited on these sessions. I'm going to navigate back to the PowerPoint here. All right. And then, Nykol, I'm going to have you move into talking about the feedback survey.
Yeah, thanks. As Amber and Kay Elizabeth mentioned, we did have a survey, so students could complete that, not required. The questions they were asked are on this slide. So they were asked whether they felt strongly agree or they strongly disagreed that the guide would help them in their current course or future assignments. Then they were asked to rate the guide from 1 to 5 stars, with 5 being very useful and 1 being not useful. And then they were provided an opportunity to give written feedback on anything else that they wanted to say about the guides. When you're done coughing, if you can go to the next slide.
So sorry. Yes.
That's okay. All right, so as Kay Elizabeth said, the results that we got from feedback were extremely positive. So for the first question, whether students felt the guide would be very helpful or not helpful at all to current and future assignments, 3,292 students that completed the survey strongly agreed that the guide was helpful for their current course or future. At the other end, we only had 103 that strongly disagreed that the guide would be helpful at all. A lot of those were probably those students who were like, I already knew this, so they didn't need it. But the positive responses were very strong, as you can see on this slide here. And we can go to the next one. So the next slide is that scale of 1 to 5, 5 being very useful. Again, from the students that completed, there were 6,349 that found the guide very useful, 74 that said not useful. And there was one little kind of weirdness in there. Some students seem to have read that scale backwards. So we did see some responses that said on the previous question that, yes, it was extremely helpful to their current or future assignments. They gave really positive verbal feedback, but then they marked the guide a 1. So it looked like there was probably a handful that just read that scale backwards. Even with that, you know, these are really, really great numbers showing that students did feel that what they reviewed in these guides was very helpful to them. And we can go to the next one. So we also grabbed a little bit of the positive feedback that we had. So one of them, you know, for the first time, I understand what exactly research is all about, how to conduct it effectively, and where to find evidence. So I believe that was related to our evidence-based practice guide, which a lot of students struggle with evidence-based practice. So that was great feedback there. And I'll just read one of the other longer ones. This training allows me to build my confidence in being able to perfect my writing skills and not suffer low grades or possible expulsion for plagiarism. I have attended other universities online several years ago, and this type of training was not available. Thank you for making sure students are given the proper tools to be successful. So we did have a ton of really positive feedback, and this is just a little teeny clip of what we got for that written feedback. And go to the next slide. And as Amber mentioned, there were some, I don't even want to say negative. There was a tiny amount of maybe negative feedback, but mostly it was kind of criticism, you know, places that we could make improvements. So probably the #1 theme there was that students wanted to have the guide somewhere earlier in their program. Another theme was they wanted to be able to print it. So they wanted a PDF or some way to print the guide out so they could just have it with them at any time to look back on and refer to. Some of them wanted more video or audio. We could add more of that. And I think that's something future we'll probably take a look at when we're able to, but that was another just for more of that interactivity that we saw that students wanted that. And then, as Amber mentioned, there were the handful of students who said they already knew it, or kind of on the more negative side that students in a master's program should know this. Why am I taking this? But as you saw in the previous slides, those were pretty low numbers for students who just didn't feel it was a good use of their time. Overall, it was just very, very positive feedback from everyone. And I think the last slide we have here. So we did also ask the counseling faculty for feedback after the guides were placed in their course for a few months. So this was faculty teaching. They had taught the courses before, and then we added the guides and they taught, and you know, we asked them to kind of compare, like what results are you seeing after having these guides in your course? It looked like this was from the first 6 guides, so we kind of did roll these out. What the faculty said was that, you know, some of them saw fewer questions from students about writing and library access. Generally, they were doing better with grammar, organizing their papers, and clearly expressing their ideas. We do have one guide on basically like reading the rubric and adhering to the rubric. So students were adhering to those assignment instructions better after the guides were placed in the courses. They were better able to use citations and references and better able to access course resources and online resources through the library. They felt more confident and receptive to feedback from faculty. And a number of faculty did say that the students commented on how helpful the guides were in their courses. So that was quick run through overview of some of that feedback that we got from students and from the faculty. And I believe that is our last slide. So hopefully we have time for questions.
Thanks, Nykol. And something else I want to say while you're thinking of questions is, you know, right now it's me and Nykol and Brittany describing this, but there were an army of people behind us that were doing this work, both on the counseling side and the OASIS side. There were, we had people doing building the guides, developing the content, doing user experience testing. We have peer mentors on staff who've been going through these and sort of commenting on the student experience side of things. The counseling faculty met with us constantly to help us kind of figure out where would this best fit? How do we divide these guides up so that we're not completely weighing down those early courses, even though every student keeps saying, I wish I had this earlier. We can't put everything in the foundations course. So having to make those decisions and getting feedback on what's working. And I think in some cases we even shifted the guides by a week or by a course as we learned things on the ground. So this was a hugely collaborative process with all sorts of folks, across these two parts of the collaboration. And I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge that. I wish we had a slide with all the names, but it would be smaller text than that other slide with all the guides on it. So anyway, I'll hush, but any questions about any of this?
Please feel free to unmute.
Oh, thank you, Kay Elizabeth. Yeah, so I mentioned very briefly early on that, our hope was after we got through this initial build of all of these guides, with the counseling program, that we wanted to be able to make these available to other programs as well. Within OASIS, we're doing as again, if you were here for Pat and Christie's session yesterday, we're doing a kind of a massive overhaul of all of the resources in our various skill areas, and with the intention of getting a lot of them more embedded within the classroom and having the same sort of approach where we're really doing almost like a journey map of different programs and figuring out where the skill needs are and figuring out what to slot in. So these guides will be part of that, as well as additional resources. There's lots of videos that will be produced, lots of other revised resources that we're coming up with. But if you're interested in that, or if you have a specific need that you can think of right now within your program, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm amber.cook@mail.waldenu.edu. Remember, there's 2 Amber Cooks at Walden. I'm not the nursing faculty member, who is wonderful, but she is not me. But she'll send me the email if you send it to her. So feel free to just reach out to me, and I am happy to work with you on identifying those spaces in your classroom, or even just making some recommendations of resources that you might want to use with individual students. That's part of what we do here on the master's team, is try to identify appropriate resources for the skill needs that you're seeing among your students. So anytime, thank you, Nykol, for putting that there. Anytime, feel free to reach out to me and we can coordinate on what this might look like in your program, or what this might look like with the students that you work with. So thank you for asking that, Kay Elizabeth. And I think, Lita, it sounded like your audio was a little crispy. I don't know if that was just on my end. Are you able to?
Crispy.
There you are.
I've never heard that. Is my audio not working well? It wouldn't surprise me.
It sounds great now.
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. Wonderful. Any other questions or comments in the chat? All right. Well, wonderful. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining today, and Amber, Nykol, and Brittany, some of the history behind this, we asked them to present this, gave them very little notice. So I want to give you a huge, huge, huge thank you for attending on such short notice. You all really hit it out of the ballpark every time. And that shows with faculty, but also in the results that you have with students. So really appreciate it. Always great collaborating with you. I am recording today's session. There will be a link to the recording on the OTLE and OAA websites. So please check those out. That it'll be about 24 hours to allow for processing time, but the link will be there if you missed any of today's session or you want to recommend this session to a colleague. Once again, thank you all for attending today's session, which is part of the NFSM and Tapestry offering. Take care, everyone.